Welcome back everyone to another Kerbal Space Program video, and today's Kerbal Space Program video we're going to be doing something kind of interesting. We're doing a mini scale Mun mission. So what that means is it's not going to be normal scale, so we're not going to really be using command pods or anything like that. I'm pretty sure, yeah, the only thing that we actually had in this mission that can hold the Kerbal was external command seats. And then we did use a probe core in this part of the staging, you know, just to have some extra control. But yeah, so it's going to be a mini scale Mun mission. It's going to be really tiny, so only one Kerbal. We're only going to be taking one Kerbal with us. It was pretty fun to design, you know. It was a bit challenging just to make sure we had enough Delta V, and you know, in the end we probably had a surplus of Delta V. So, you know, we were good in that part of this mission. But, you know, we're going to the Mun, like I'm saying, we're going to the Mun, and nothing too crazy. Actually, I've done a Mun tutorial before. I think it was the first video I've ever done on my channel, so if you haven't watched that one, you could go check it out if you need to know how to get to the Mun. But that's pretty much the whole premise of this video, so now we can kind of talk more about what's happening on screen. You can see we did construct those two separate crafts there. That one that I was dragging around just there is the lander, and then the other one is a separate stage. This is going to be kind of carrying us from low Kerbin orbit and then to the Mun, and then from the Mun back to Kerbin. And yeah, so this is gonna be it's not gonna be a direct ascent mission, meaning we're not gonna have a lander which is also gonna bring us back to Kerbin. We're going to have a orbital rendezvous, meaning the lander is gonna come back up and dock with that ship, and then that ship is gonna take us the rest of the way back to Kerbin. And since this is a small scale mission, you're probably noticing that I haven't put any parachutes or heat shields, and you'll see why towards the end of the video, why there aren't any heat shields or parachutes. Now you can see that we're just constructing the rest of the rocket. I went with a Poodle engine and then a mainsail with two Thumper engines, and that's going to be the first stage, the mainsail on the Thumper, and then we're going to use the Poodle to bring us the rest of the way to Kerbin orbit, and then we're going to use it to get us on a Mun encounter. But anyway, that was the whole building process over, and now we can get ready for launch. So you can see that here we're just doing a nice pan around of the rocket. It was inspired a little bit by the design of the Saturn V rocket, which was used in the Apollo programs to get the you know, the first people on the moon. But you know, it's not perfectly in line with it, because the Saturn V rocket had 5 J2 engines in the first stage, and then it had another 5 engines in the second. It's not, what I'm trying to say is that it's not exactly right. I'll probably do a Saturn V recreation one day, once I get the Making History DLC. So that'll be, I guess, something to look forward to. But anyway, talking more about the mission, now we are raising up our orbit. So we went for a 80-kilometer apoapsis height. I really like 80 kilometers for the apoapsis height, just because it's right above the not right above the Kármán line, but it's well above the Kármán line of Kerbin, which is 70 kilometers, and the Kármán line is what separates, or what is kind of the boundary between space and the atmosphere. So it's not really like a physical thing. It's kind of more where space ends and where the atmosphere starts, or vice versa. Yeah, it's really good because, especially for docking, it's a low orbit, so that most of the things that are in orbit will be higher, so we can catch up to them and everything. So it's pretty versatile when it comes to orbits. But now you can see that we were adjusting our inclination, and we're getting ready to execute that burn right now. And we got it pretty perfect, so we had a 0-degree inclination relative to the Mun, and now we can kind of rearrange everything, so we can undock that lander and then kind of redock it like that, and then we can get ready to go to the Mun. So I wanted to, you know, since this was a little bit inspired by the Saturn V, or by the Apollo missions, I kind of wanted to go for a free return trajectory. And what a free return trajectory is where you get an encounter with a celestial body, like a planet or a moon or anything like that, and you orbit it in such a way where no matter what happens, if you don't like end up orbiting that planet. So like if you have an engine failure or something, you'll still come right back to Earth, or in this case Kerbin. So it's kind of the reason why they did it in the Apollo missions was just as a safety precaution. You know, just in case there was an engine failure, they didn't have to, you know, be stranded in outer space and then probably face death or anything like that. But I didn't end up going for it just because I haven't had a lot of experience with return trajectories before, and I didn't really want to risk it on this mission. So yeah, that's why I didn't do one. And you can actually see that there we got ourselves on a collision course with the Mun. And the reason I did that was because we had that poodle stage, and I didn't want to, you know, leave that poodle stage in orbit around Kerbin or in orbit around the Mun. So I got us into a collision course with the Mun, decoupled from that poodle stage, and then using that Terrier engine, we kind of adjusted our orbit so we wouldn't hit the Mun, and that way the poodle engine will crash harmlessly into the surface of the Mun, and we will be fine and just be able to get into orbit. And speaking of getting to orbit, that's what we're doing now. So we're lowering our apoapsis, and I went for 30 kilometers. The reason for that is because once we ascend from the Mun with the lander, we'll have space underneath the other craft's orbit. That way we can, you know, kind of catch up to it and get the docking the most efficient way. Because usually I go for 20-kilometer orbits to like 15 to 20 kilometer orbits, but you know, that's the reason why I went for 30 kilometers. And now we're landing on the Mun. You probably noticed that I didn't actually put any landing legs. That's because a lot of them felt too big for this mission. So what I ended up doing was putting those cubic octagonal struts, and I had to be really careful not to, you know, end up landing too quickly, or else, you know, it probably just wouldn't be fun for the Kerbal even though the gravity is low. But you know, we just want to make sure that our Kerbals are satisfactory on their missions. And you could see when we exited the craft there a couple seconds ago, our Kerbal got ejected a little bit, and that's because the helmet was clipped in to that top fuel tank there, so it kind of glitched out a little bit. But it was fine. The main thing I was worried about there was if the craft would get knocked over, but luckily it didn't. And now we can ascend. So on the Mun you can pretty much tip right away, tip 90 degrees about, right off the bat, just because the gravity is so low. So any initial upward thrust will kind of get you the most of the way, and then you just have to worry about increasing it horizontally. And like I was saying before, we want to make sure that we get into an orbit lower than the craft we're trying to dock to. That way we can catch up to it, and it won't take that long. Now you can see that we're just finalizing the orbit, and then the next thing we need to do, like in any docking process, is to just change our inclination to it to make it as easy as possible to dock to. Then we're just going to time warp towards the maneuver node, and then we're going to execute the burn. Even though I was only using the spark engine on this lander stage, it had a lot of thrust to weight ratio, because now that I think about it, all we really had on there were like 2 tiny little fuel tanks, a reaction wheel, docking port, and a Kerbal. That's really only the significant weight that was on there. So the spark engine was probably a little overkill. Could have probably gone with like an ant engine or something. But I digress. That's not really relevant now, because I already added a spark. I keep wanting to call it a skipper engine. I don't know why, but I already added the spark engine, so nothing we can do about it now. And it ended up working, so there's nothing we really had to do about it. Now we're just docking. For some reason, I'm pretty sure that when you have a craft like right-clicked, it should appear in a green box around it when you exit the map screen. And for some reason, I can't seem to find the reason why the green box is not there. So if you know why it's not there and you know how I can fix it, just let me know in the comments, because it's kind of annoying that I have to, you know, scour the black sky or the black outer space just to see the little craft I'm docking to. But now the docking is done, so we can take our Kerbinaut out of the seat and then transfer any remaining fuel just to make sure we use the most of our fuel. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get us on a suborbital trajectory, then undock from that craft so it'll crash back into the Mun, and then speed ourselves up a little bit so we don't crash into the surface of the Mun. and we can get back into Kerbin, which we are doing now. So I just extended our orbit out a little bit so we could get into the Kerbin sphere of influence, and then we can do fine-tuning to the height of our orbit. Speaking of the height of our orbit, we need to be careful on this because, like I was saying, there's no heat shields and there's no parachutes. So we want to make sure that we're going slow enough, because the way that we're going to slow down actually is by using the Kerbal's like a little kind of personal parachute that they have, and that's going to pretty much save us from crashing into the ground. And we're obviously going to eject them from the seat before we do that, so that stage that they're in right now will crash into Kerbin, but our Kerbal will be safe, which is probably the most important thing in any mission. And then for the heat shield, we are going to use the belly, I want to say, of the fuel tank, because the fuel tanks are in Kerbal Space Program are really resilient to overheating in atmospheres, especially. So you know, that's gonna help us, you know, not explode, and it's also gonna help us create some drag to do some initial slowing. And we didn't end up going too fast when we were in the atmosphere, and I did actually try to do that on purpose. So I brought us on our encounter with the atmosphere at about 60 kilometers instead of what I would usually do would probably be lower, like around, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, or 50. But this mission I really didn't want to explode, so I went on the safer side, and it worked out. Here what was happening is that I was trying to figure out why the parachute was not deploying, and the reason was that I had RCS enabled. So make sure that you don't have RCS enabled or your parachute won't deploy. But luckily I figured it out, and our Kerbinaut was fine. That is the whole video. That went by really quickly. That is the whole video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like down below. I'd really appreciate it. And if you've enjoyed what I've been making so far, as far as videos are concerned, please hit the subscribe button. It'll help grow the channel. And if you have any suggestions for future missions, leave them in the comments. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.